Daniel Ek's story begins in a quiet apartment in Stockholm, Sweden, where creativity and curiosity were encouraged more than anything else. From the time he was a young boy, Daniel showed a fascination with computers, machines that seemed both mysterious and full of possibility. While other children spent afternoons playing outside, Daniel preferred sitting in front of an old computer, exploring how it worked, learning its patterns, and imagining everything it could become. He didn't speak loudly or seek attention. He simply fell deeply, quietly, in love with technology. By the age of 5, Daniel was already experimenting with simple coding. He learned how to make basic programs, discovering a sense of control and creativity that made the digital world feel like home. When he typed on a keyboard, the outside world faded, problems made sense, logic felt comforting, and each line of code gave him the thrill of building something from nothing. Even at that young age, Daniel felt that technology wasn't just a tool, it was a way of expressing himself. Growing up, Daniel felt different from the people around him. He was introverted, thoughtful, and happiest when he was creating. He spent hours learning new languages, not spoken languages, but programming languages. He stayed up late building projects, taking apart old electronics, and teaching himself skills most adults didn't understand. His teachers noticed his talent, but didn't fully grasp its depth. For Daniel, computers weren't a hobby. They were a world where he could think clearly and dream freely. In school, Daniel wasn't the most outgoing student, but he was always the one classmates turned to when they needed help understanding technology. He had a calm way of explaining things, breaking down complex ideas into simple steps. That quiet patience would become a defining quality of his leadership years later. But at the time, Daniel didn't see himself as special. He simply loved helping people understand the world he found so fascinating. When Daniel reached his teenage years, his passion for technology turned into something more practical. He started creating websites for local businesses, charging small amounts at first and slowly increasing his rates as his skills improved. He worked from his bedroom, building sites late into the night, balancing schoolwork with projects that earned more than many adults made in a month. What started as curiosity soon became a career. By 14, Daniel was making more money than most of his teachers. Despite his success, Daniel didn't become arrogant or distracted. He stayed grounded, thoughtful, and humble. He still spent evenings listening to music, sitting quietly with his headphones on, letting melodies shape his imagination. Music wasn't just entertainment for him, it was emotional architecture. It guided his mood, inspired his creativity, and helped him make sense of the world. Without realizing it, Daniel was forming the foundation of what would one day become Spotify. As he grew older, Daniel became even more ambitious. He wanted to build bigger things, projects that would matter to people in real, human ways. So he continued teaching himself new technologies, pushing himself to learn faster and think more deeply. At the same time, he struggled with the pressure of growing expectations. Being the talented kid with computers came with a weight he didn't always know how to carry. But Daniel channeled those emotions into focus. Whenever life felt overwhelming, he returned to the clarity of his keyboard. By the time Daniel finished high school, he had already lived multiple versions of his future. He could have worked full-time as a developer. He could have started a company. He could have gone to university. But deep inside, he felt that his path would be something different, something that combined his love of technology with his love of music. He didn't know what it was yet. He just knew it would require patience, courage, and a willingness to build slowly. Daniel entered adulthood with curiosity, creativity, and a quiet confidence shaped by years of exploring the digital world alone. He was ready to start building something bigger, even if he didn't yet understand what that was. His journey towards Spotify hadn't begun, but the qualities he needed, discipline, empathy, resilience, and imagination were already taking shape. And soon, life would place him on a path where those traits would become essential. As Daniel Ek stepped into adulthood, he continued building websites and digital tools, slowly expanding his reputation across Sweden's growing tech community. What began as a teenage side job turned into a real income, sometimes more money than he knew what to do with. By the time he turned 19, he was earning the kind of paycheck that made people twice his age feel surprised, and maybe even a little intimidated. Yet Daniel didn't chase fame or luxury. He stayed grounded, quietly focused on learning and improving. During these years, he worked at several companies, including uTorrent and Advertigo, where he developed a reputation as a brilliant problem solver. He could see patterns others missed, he could find simple solutions to complicated problems, and he could build fast, bringing ideas to life in days instead of months. But even with success, Daniel felt something missing. He was creating valuable tools, yet none of them felt emotionally meaningful. He wanted to build something that mattered not just to the tech world, but to people. Despite the financial success, Daniel eventually found himself burning out. He bought a nice apartment, expensive equipment, even a sports car. But the novelty faded quickly. The material world didn't fulfill him the way coding or music did. He realized something many people never allow themselves to admit. Success without purpose feels empty. Daniel stepped back from the tech race for a while, spending time reflecting on what he truly wanted his life's work to represent. During this reflective period, Daniel began focusing more on music, the one constant emotional anchor in his life. He saw how people were consuming music in the mid-2000s, illegally downloading unstable files, dealing with viruses, waiting endlessly for transfers. The experience was slow, frustrating, and deeply disconnected from the joy music was supposed to bring. At the same time, struggling artists received almost nothing from the chaotic state of the industry. Something inside Daniel ached at this. He believed people deserved better. Slowly, the idea formed. What if music could be instant? What if every song in the world could be accessed legally, easily, and beautifully? The concept sounded impossible. Internet speeds were slow. Licensing would be a nightmare. Labels were losing money and saw tech as a threat. Most people would have dismissed the idea immediately. But Daniel couldn't. He felt a quiet certainty that the world needed a better way to listen to music, and he believed he could build it. Around this time, Daniel met Martin Lorentzon, an energetic, passionate tech entrepreneur who would become his co-founder and one of the most important people in his life. They were different in many ways, Daniel calm and introspective, Martin louder and boldly imaginative. But the partnership worked beautifully. The two of them would sit for hours discussing the state of the internet, the music industry, and the future of digital entertainment. Those conversations planted the early seeds of Spotify, yet turning the idea into reality was far harder than either of them expected. The technology needed to be fast, almost instant. The design needed to be simple, almost invisible. And the licensing agreements with labels needed to be negotiated one by one, often face to face. Every step felt like climbing a mountain. But Daniel didn't give up. He returned to the qualities that shaped him as a child: patience, focus, and deep curiosity. He built a small engineering team in Stockholm, hiring people who shared his obsession with speed, quality, and user experience. Together they began creating something that felt magical, a program that let users click a song and hear it instantly, with almost no delay. The experience felt impossible, even surreal. Daniel knew that if they could combine this technology with the right music catalog, they could change the industry forever. But the hardest part still lay ahead. Record labels were skeptical. Many didn't trust technology companies. Some believed streaming would destroy what little revenue they had left. Meetings were tense, emotional, and sometimes discouraging. But Daniel approached each negotiation with respect. He listened more than he spoke. He tried to understand the fears, the frustrations, and the hopes of the people sitting across from him. His empathy slowly built bridges that no one else had been able to build. Step by step, one conversation at a time, Daniel was moving toward something extraordinary, toward a future where music could flow freely and fairly once again. As Daniel Ek and his small team pushed forward, they realized that building the technology was only half the battle. The real challenge lay in convincing the world's biggest record labels to trust a young Swedish startup with a radical idea. Many executives had been burned before by tech companies that promised fairness but delivered disruption. Piracy had left deep scars across the industry. When Daniel entered each meeting, he wasn't just pitching a product. He was facing years of fear, frustration, and uncertainty. Yet he approached every conversation with calm respect, listening before speaking. Despite his gentle demeanor, Daniel carried a fierce determination. He wasn't trying to save the music industry or claim heroism. He simply believed that people deserved an easy, legal way to enjoy music, and that artists deserved a fairer system than the one they had. Every time a label executive told him the idea wouldn't work, he absorbed the criticism and asked more questions. He treated rejection like data, not defeat. This quiet resilience kept him returning to the table again and again. While negotiations dragged on, Daniel continued perfecting Spotify's core experience. He wanted streaming to feel instantaneous, almost like magic. The engineering team worked tirelessly, refining code, reducing latency, and designing every detail with care. Daniel obsessed over the emotional feeling of clicking play, how it should be smooth, warm, and seamless. He believed that music wasn't just content, it was emotion. The technology had to protect that feeling, not interrupt it. But the longer negotiations stretched, the more pressure Daniel felt. The company was running out of money. Investors questioned whether the idea was realistic. Some urged Daniel to scale back his ambitions, cut corners, or compromise on quality. But he refused. Daniel wasn't building a shortcut, he was building a legacy. He believed that if Spotify didn't offer an experience dramatically better than piracy, users wouldn't care. Quality wasn't optional, it was the foundation of trust. The stress of this period took a toll. Daniel worked long nights, barely slept, and spent weeks in cramped meeting rooms trying to spark progress. He often questioned whether he was pushing too hard, aiming too high, or asking for something impossible. Yet every time doubt crept in, he returned to one simple truth. The world needed a better way to experience music. And if he didn't try, someone else eventually would. That belief kept him moving, one conversation at a time. Then slowly, progress came. One label agreed to explore the idea. Then another opened their doors. These weren't victories, they were invitations to keep trying. Daniel built relationships based on transparency and patience. He explained Spotify's model repeatedly, showing how artists could be paid fairly and how users could access music safely. He never tried to force trust. He earned it gently through sincerity and persistence. As deals began to fall into place, the team prepared for Spotify's first limited launch. They rolled out the platform quietly in parts of Europe, testing features, collecting feedback, and making constant improvements. Users who discovered Spotify described it as magic, instant, and life-changing. They loved the simplicity, they loved the speed, and they loved the feeling of having the world's music at their fingertips. Daniel knew they still had a long way to go, but for the first time, he saw a glimpse of the future he had imagined for years. Spotify grew slowly, almost cautiously. Daniel resisted the temptation to rush expansion. He prioritized stability over hype, relationships over rapid growth. The team improved algorithms, refined discovery tools, and studied how people interacted with playlists and recommendations. Daniel wanted Spotify to feel personal, like a friend who understood your taste, mood, and moments. Music had always guided his emotions. Now he wanted the platform to do the same for others. But success brought new challenges. Competitors emerged. Critics questioned Spotify's ability to pay artists fairly. Governments raised regulatory concerns. Daniel faced pressure from every direction. Yet through it all, he stayed steady. He spoke calmly, listened deeply, and made decisions with a long-term perspective. Spotify wasn't just a company to him, it was a mission to reshape how the world experienced sound, connection, and creativity. Step by step, the once impossible dream became real. The technology worked, the labels trusted him, and the users loved what he had built. Daniel's quiet persistence had carried Spotify through its hardest years, and now he was stepping into the next chapter, leading a global platform watched by millions, guided by a philosophy rooted not in power, but in humility. As Spotify grew into a global platform, Daniel Ek found himself navigating an entirely new set of pressures. The company had millions of users, partnerships across continents, and a spotlight on every decision he made. Competitors released their own streaming services, and critics questioned Spotify's business model, its long-term viability, and its relationship with artists. The industry that once doubted Daniel now depended on him, and that weight was never easy to carry. Yet through all the noise, Daniel remained grounded in the quiet values that shaped him since childhood. He believed that Spotify should serve two groups above all else, listeners and creators. That meant balancing innovation with fairness, technology with humanity. As CEO, Daniel focused on building tools that empowered artists, especially those who lived outside traditional industry structures. He introduced features that helped musicians understand their audiences, promote their work, and earn income in new ways. Every improvement was guided by a simple belief that music is one of the most universal forms of human connection, and the people who create it deserve respect. Leading Spotify wasn't just about strategy, it was about staying true to a mission that often felt emotionally heavy. Daniel understood the responsibility his platform carried. A single feature could influence how millions listened. A single contract could affect thousands of artists. Instead of rushing, he made decisions with intention, seeking advice, studying effects, and listening to people whose voices rarely reached corporate offices. His calm approach created stability in an industry shaped by uncertainty. There were difficult moments, controversies, financial challenges, and debates that forced Daniel and his team to rethink what Spotify should become. Some critics demanded immediate perfection, while Daniel worked methodically, knowing real change takes time. He didn't shy away from mistakes or conversations that were uncomfortable. Instead, he learned from them, adjusting Spotify's direction while staying anchored in empathy. To him, leadership was never about being right. It was about being willing to grow. As the company expanded into podcasts, audiobooks, and new discovery tools, Daniel kept returning to the same idea that inspired Spotify's earliest days. He wanted to create a platform that brought the world closer through sound. Music, he believed, had the power to comfort, inspire, energize, and heal. In moments of joy or struggle, people turned to songs to feel understood. Daniel wanted Spotify to be a place where those moments felt effortless, personal, and deeply human. Despite the complexity of running a global company, Daniel remained quiet and introspective outside the public eye. He spent time with his family, listened to music for hours, and continued exploring new forms of creativity. Success hadn't changed his core personality. He still believed in working patiently, thinking deeply, and staying humble. To him, greatness wasn't about being the loudest voice, It was about building something meaningful that lasts. Looking back on his journey, Daniel often reflected on how improbable his path had been. A quiet kid in Sweden who loved computers, a teenager building websites from his bedroom, a young adult searching for purpose, and eventually the CEO of a company that reshaped the global music industry. He never claimed to be a genius or a visionary. He simply followed curiosity, trusted his instincts, and worked with persistence when others doubted him. Daniel Ek's story is a reminder that meaningful impact doesn't come from noise or speed. It comes from patience, integrity, and the willingness to keep moving even when the world tells you something is impossible. It teaches us that creativity can become a force for connection and that quiet persistence can change entire industries. And it reminds us that there is strength in staying true to who you are, even when your path feels uncertain. As this documentary comes to a gentle close, take a slow breath. Let Daniel's journey remind you that your ideas matter, your passions matter, and your quiet determination can lead you places you've never imagined. Wherever you are in your own story, trust your curiosity, trust your pace, and trust that you are growing in ways you cannot yet see. Good night.